Hello, my most amazing artists. Today we're going to be creating an optical illusion. To start out with, you're going to write your name and your class code on the back of your paper and then flip it over. I'm going to start with pencil, drawing very lightly. I'm going to place my hand down, my non-dominant hand, the one I don't draw with, on the paper and then trace it with my hand that I do draw with. So I'm holding it still and tracing around. The slower I go, the better it will end up. So make sure that you take your time, but really draw lightly in case you need to erase. The goal of this is not to make it absolutely dark. It's to make it really, really light for this optical illusion to happen. Then when I'm done tracing my hand in the middle of my paper with my fingers kind of spread out, maybe even more than I did, then I'm going to start to use my ruler. When I use my ruler, I'm going to be drawing straight horizontal lines across my hand. However, I'm not actually going over top of my hand. I'm skipping over top of it. So as I'm drawing my line, it's on either side of my hand, almost like it's going behind my hand and my hand is on top. So I'm not drawing that straight line through the hand. Anytime I hit the hand, I make sure I skip on over it with my pencil. So when it gets to the fingers, it gets tricky because I need to skip over, and then keep going with my straight line. Now I'm trying my best to make these lines about the same width apart from each other. I'm making them about a 1/2 inch, but they're not perfect. I did not measure this out. If you wanted to measure it out, you could, but I'm going to just move quickly by making some straight lines. I'm not making them too close together though. I would say about this far apart is good to go. Not really too close and not too far apart. Now I'm going to start connecting my lines. But when I connect my lines, I'm going to be making an arch. An arch is like a rainbow line that goes up and over and connects at the other one, but it gets tricky around the fingers. This is the part where you need to make sure that you're still pretending that it connects. So finding that straight line, but going up and over to connect it. So when you get to the fingers, always make sure that you're making that rainbow arch line instead of just making a straight line through the finger. This is what's going to create that optical illusion by making your curvy lines. Every time that you see a straight line, you need to go up and over and make a curvy one before you hit back down on that straight line. Now, that'll be a little bit easier to see now that I'm going over top with Sharpie. But with my Sharpie, I'm not tracing around the outline of my hand. I'm only going to trace over those lines I just drew. The horizontal lines that are straight, but then also the curvy line that goes and bumps on over my hand. So I'm not tracing around the outline of my hand that I started out with drawing. I'm just going over top of those straight lines and then followed by the arch lines on my hand. So remember, every time you get to your hand, it should start to go up and down. So even if it doesn't go all the way through and your hand starts to get to parts where you have your fingers and in between your fingers, make sure that you're making a curved line every time you're either on a finger or on the hand, and every time you're off of it, it's a straight horizontal line. I know this is a little bit tricky and might take some time to figure out, but that's okay because we can do hard things. And when we do, it makes a really awesome optical illusion in this case. Now, there are quite a few things that we might need some practice doing. If you would like to practice this first, you could practice lightly in your sketchbook or on a whiteboard, something like that, so you can get the hang of the idea before you do it on your final paper, because it is difficult to erase. I'm actually not too worried about erasing my pencil lines because I still want to see a little bit of the outline of my hand. But I'm going to use markers now. So I'm going to be using colored markers in a pattern. So I'm going to choose a warm color pattern. I'm going to start at the first black line and trace on the top of it. So I'm going over top of every black line. I'm going on top of it instead of under it because that's going to start creating a pattern and following the optical illusion. So I'm tracing over top anywhere that there's a bump or a straight line. I follow that with my colored marker. This is going to be really important to create that optical illusion with the color as well. You could absolutely keep it black and white, but it really makes a difference when you start adding that color. It looks like that hand is popping out of the page. The more that you pay attention to your color scheme and how you're holding your marker. Notice I'm holding it on the side to create the chisel tip of it, which makes a larger line instead of a little tiny line made by just on the point of my marker. This also makes sure that my marker is working quickly, but not having to go back and forth or have wobbly little lines. It's always a good idea to use the side of the marker if you're making a thick line like that. And that way I don't have to press down hard on my marker and it doesn't flatten the tip of it. Now I'm tracing over with my next color. I decided to do a warm color pattern or color scheme. So now I'm going to my orange. My warm colors are colors like fire. So I'm using red, orange, and yellow. You could use cool colors like maybe purples and greens and blues, and that would look awesome too. The reason I'm using all warm colors is that way my colors of marker can mix well together. I'm not purposely mixing them, but when I make those lines on top of each other, chasing after my last line, following that same pattern with the bumps and the straight lines, it might happen where it mixed together, especially when I finish with my orange and I get to my yellow. The yellow is something that if I had, say, purple instead before my yellow, it would create brown in between those two colors if my marker touched the last color, because markers are water soluble, so when you mix them together, it is like paint and they do create whatever color it does when they mix. So if I were to mix opposite colors like orange and blue or red and green, it does make brown. Now those colors do look really good together. You could absolutely pick a color pattern like orange, blue, orange, blue, orange, blue. Just make sure that when you're doing that, you don't mix those two together. You'd have to keep them separated every time you make a line, which is a little tricky because I'm working very close together with all of these lines. So that's why I chose all warm colors. But if you want to do a pattern that really stands out, like complementary colors or opposites on the color wheel, just make sure you're taking your time with your marker so that way it doesn't mix together and create a brown in between. It's going to be really eye-catching when you use a color scheme like warm colors, complementary colors, cool colors, something like that. Or analogous colors, and you could do a whole rainbow. I'm just adding a little bit of a shadow just to see what it would look like with my pencil on that left-hand side, because it would create a shadow anywhere that it was popping out and the light was hitting on one side, there'd be a shadow on the other. But remember, I did not do that with a Sharpie. I'm just going through with pencil to try to create some attention to that shadow. I probably could have done a little bit better of a job with my lines to make it look more like an illusion, but I'm pretty happy with it. So I'm going to clean up my area, put away my Sharpies, make sure their caps are on, my marker caps are clicked and snapped on, and then I can clean up my area by spraying down my table only when my paper is put away. You don't ever want to spray while your paper is on your table. Gonna wipe it up and clean up, and I'm all ready to go to put this in my portfolio. All right, my awesome artists, I cannot wait to see you try to create your optical illusions today. Have fun taking on this challenge.